to the Tax Terminal, which is India's first student-run blog dedicated to exclusive discourse on taxation. It operates under the aegis of Center for Comparative and International Taxation at the Jindal Global Law School. It aims to serve as a hub for tax-related discussion, fiscal policy coverage, and tax news dissemination. It serves as a forum for facilitating knowledge sharing on contemporary challenges in the fiscal arena. At present, there are four segments at the tax terminal. The first being tax bulletins that offer quick news bites relating to critical fiscal developments around the globe. The second segment is the tax resource segment, which provides study references and guides on crucial issues in the tax domain. Thirdly, the tax terminal also offers Tax Wit, which features a humor post every day. And lastly, we also have the Bricks and Bytes segment, which features a tax related crossword every week covering a wide area of taxation. Now, before we move any further, I request Yojit sir for his permission to record this session for future references.
Certainly, I mean, you can record the session, of course.
Thank you.
So,
Already prepared.
I can start.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir.
It's already.
So may I please introduce you? May I please yeah. Uh, Thank you. Mr. Yojit Parikh is a partner at the Chambers of Jain and Kumar. He specializes in tax laws, transfer pricing, international tax, mergers and acquisitions, contract law, real estate law, and intellectual property. Prior to joining the Chambers of Jain and Kumar, Mr. Yojit had worked with Tier 1 firms such as Khaitan and Company and AZB Partners. He comes with an experience of representing individuals, startups, multinational companies before Benami authorities, assessing officers, transfer pricing officers, CIT appeals, Income Tax Appellate Tribunal, NCDRC, various high courts, and the Supreme Court of India. He is also on the advisory board of various certain legal blogs. Mr. Yojit ensures effective and most prudent solutions for his clients in a time effective manner. Sir, we are truly elated to have you with us. Thank you for joining us today evening. I would also like to welcome Ms. Kriti Chawla, who is an assistant professor of law at General Global Law School. I thank you for joining us, ma'am.
Thank you.
I also thank Professor Sana Javed for joining us this evening. Without further ado, I request Yojit sir to kindly enlighten us and walk us through his article. Uh, uh, Thank you, sir.
So good evening, everyone. So, firstly, thank you, Samir, for such a warm introduction. And I would like to thank Sana, Kriti, and everyone at CCIT and General Global University to invite me for this session. So, before I begin the discussion on the article, I would discuss in 5 minutes about my thought process of writing this article. Why did I choose this topic? So, when Sana invited me to write for CCIT and Tax Terminal, so why I chose this topic is because historically, of course, transfer pricing, international tax is something which is developed in last couple of years only. But tax system and prosecution has been a very historic concept. It's been there since ancient times. You must have heard, you must have seen, must have read old stories, must have heard old stories where the king used to implement tax and impose tax on the subjects. And if subjects were not able to pay taxes, then they used to just seize the property or they used to just imprison those subjects. So, for example, Lagan, to everyone must have seen. So, the Teen Guna Lagan is, of course, a tax system which was followed back in the age of British India. So taxes has been a part of every regime where the king, the sovereign, has been imposing taxes as a duty on all the citizen to run the well-being of a state and welfare of a state. So this is just a amount imposed on every citizen to get protection from the king. So that's how taxes have been there in ancient times. And of course, in my article, I've also mentioned about Chanakya's Arthashastra, where he has given paramounts to taxation in governing any sovereign by in governing any kingdom by a sovereign. So hence tax becomes very important, and we can see there used to be certain countries and states who never used to impose much personal taxes, but now, for example, Arabia, and now they are also imposing taxes because there needs to be a continuous revenue stream for a country, and taxes gives you those continuous stream. So every year, even our country sets a target, and when the union budget comes, they set the annual uh, revenue and annual expenses. So if you read the budget documents, you'll see the calculations fairly given. And in my article, I've given the numbers which the government has projected for this particular financial year. Now, to achieve those numbers, there needs to be an effective tax collection. Now, tax collection can happen through three whips primarily. One is the interest, other one is penalty, and third one is prosecution. Whereas prosecution becomes the most strongest tool to recover taxes from the taxpayer. Because bail and jail is, of course, the most feared concept in India. Now, why the topic is important for all of us here? So there may be a case where most of us may not be practicing tax or may not want to practice tax in future. But this topic always come to rescue when you are even doing a corporate law or a litigation. So for example, when you're when you're practicing as a litigating advocate, you may get cases where your own client, who is of course working with you or who comes to you, may have these notices coming to him. So it becomes imperative for you to advise him on that occasion that how he should go ahead with the remedies. Of course, they are criminal offenses and they are dealt by the criminal courts only. Now, when you are working as a corporate lawyer, there as well, taxes and the prosecution mechanism forms a very important concept to always remember. For example, when you're working as an M&A lawyer and you are doing due diligence on target companies, over there you may be reviewing a lot of documents which are pertinent to litigation of a company, pending litigations, pending notices, pending demand notices. So it becomes important to assess that how it may impact the key personals of the company or how it may impact company from a liability perspective. Uh, so there was some network issue, I think. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Yeah. So to continue where we left, so taxes, of course, form the very basic of everything we do. So someone said, I think it was Benjamin Franklin or Isaac Newton, one of them, that death and taxes are forever. So similar way, death and taxes are forever and they're present everywhere in every sphere of your work you're doing as a lawyer. So from a liability perspective, one needs to assess that, okay, if there's a prosecution notice, a complaint file, we need to assess that, okay, how much outgo may happen later or how much liability may be imposed on the officers or directors of the company. So starting with that, the topics I have broadly covered in my article is who can be prosecuted, what are the parameters of prosecution, and what is the role of any pending proceeding on prosecution. So now who can be prosecuted becomes the most important question. Now a company is an artificial being. A company can't be prosecuted. So there needs to be someone who should bear the brunt. So for that, there are officers of the company who are calling shots for the company. They are the ones who will get prosecuted. Now, firstly, their company can also be prosecuted, but only in the way of penalties. So that's the way companies can be prosecuted. But if you want to imprison someone, that's only the officers who are conducting activities in the company. Now, when it comes to the HUF, it's the Karta. When you come to a partnership, it's the partners who are running the business. When it comes to sole proprietorship, they are the individuals. And when it comes to trust, then they are the trustees who are controlling the affairs of a trust. So in every offense or every kind of person, there is someone who is controlling, who's the brain behind the business and behind the uh, attempt of evading taxes or behind any offense of which can be prosecuted. So that brain becomes the person who can be prosecuted. So now I had given instances where someone may be prosecuted, someone may not be prosecuted. So for example, a lot of times you're just a director of a company and your record is available on the MCA, and that director has no role to play with finances. He's just a technical director. He's just looking after the core production or manufacturing or some other activity which is not related to finances or filing taxes or maintaining accounts. Even that director will get a notice because his records are available on MCA. So the practice what income tax or any other authority follows while sending these notices are looking at the MCA records. So when you go on MCA website, there is a place called view public documents, or there's a place called check company master data. So master data will have number of directors over there. They will pick up their names and they will send notices to those directors. Most of the time notices are just copy pasted notices, just names are being changed always. They don't pay attention to whether when was the director appointed, was he even a director when the offense really happened. So this has really happened in one of the case I was dealing with 2-3 years ago. So the directors were appointed in 2017, but the offense happened back in 2013. The directors who were there in 2013, they never got the notice, but the directors who were appointed in 17, they got the notices because their names were appearing on MCA. So that's again an absurd way how authorities work with. So in those cases, of course, we need to take our own defenses, which I will deal in the later part of the presentation in the talk. So after that, how will you save this person? Even though being a technical director, he was even present at the time of offense being committed. So even in those cases, we need to really see what was his role, tell the department. If the department does not agree, then it goes to trial. In the trial, we have to prove that, okay, he was never available. So one of the cases, our technical director was prosecuted, notices were sent, and matter was pending in Tis Hazari court in Delhi. And we had filed a quashing petition before the High Court, which I will deal with later, of course. And the judge clearly told us that even though he's a technical director, but that becomes a question of fact, which I can't go into. So you go to trial court, argue that over there, file your discharge, and if they don't give you any relief, then please come to me. So even courts take a very protected view in that manner, very comfortable view, so that things and proceedings keep on going and continuing. Now, when it comes to sleeping partners, there are a lot of people who are just partners for the sake of it, who have just invested money. For example, there are investors in startups who just have few shares, or who just have a partnership just because they have given money, they have contributed capital. Even they may get notices at times, but then they are not doing anything with the company. They have nothing to do with company's affairs. So they're protecting them. Of course, we need to take additional grounds. We need to take prepare submissions that way. So anyone who is associated may receive a notice. There is no hard and fast scientific basis of sending notices. So coming to the fact that what happens when a person gets a notice. Now, and when a person gets a notice, first important thing is that we need to really uh, deal with things patiently. When I say patiently, because the importance of patience here is that a lot of times when a notice comes, there is a chance people start panicking that, okay, there's a tax notice which has come, oh, there's a prosecution notice which has come, we're going to go to jail, there is no bail we can get, blah blah blah. So those stigmas really come into your mind as soon as you see a notice. Now, what do we need to do? We need to analyze the allegations made against us and then make a submission. So, as the factually, what I just discussed, that if a person was not a director at that time, or for example, his role is not concerning to financial affairs, he's just a technical person. Those defenses are required to be built in, and notices are immediately supposed to be replied. Otherwise, what happens is if we do a delay, they will not hesitate in filing a complaint before the appropriate authority. So why do we need to really push the notice our replies? So in a case, notices we got notices in January end, say like 31st January, and the officer gave us time to reply by 15th of February. We gave our replies, and by 31st of March, the complaint was already filed in before the court, the magistrate. Now, in this period of 1.5 months, officer assessed that there needs to be a case filed. He prepared his submissions. He sent those submissions to his senior officers for approval, and he even prepared a complaint. He briefed the public prosecutor and even filed a complaint before the ACMM. So we can see how fast things move when it comes to prosecution. The rationale behind is that this is the most effective remedy for department officers, and this is when they show that carrot and stick approach, they then need to act swiftly on that. Now coming to the second part, so a lot of times people get a idea in their head that okay, there is no pending proceedings, assessment has not happened, or facts have not been determined yet. Still, my prosecution is continuing, it's happening. So Supreme Court in various cases has settled this law clearly that prosecution and assessment proceedings, even appellate proceedings or reassessment proceedings for that matter, all of them can run simultaneously with each other because nature is different. And there is one case of, I'll just, I've just referred it somewhere. Yeah. So SK Perumal, it's a 1984 case where Supreme Court said that prosecution is a remedy which needs to be taken care of immediately by the investigation wing. So in that case, they can't keep waiting for the assessment proceedings. Now there are other cases such as B. Premanand. Then there is another case of Sasi Enterprises, what I've dealt in my article also. There's a case of Standard Chartered versus Bank versus ED. All of them are Supreme Court cases where court have opined that both the proceedings are separate in nature and they can run simultaneously. So of course, law does not provide anywhere that assessment needs to happen first. And when we see interpretation of statutes, a taxing statute needs to be interpreted very strictly. So by going by strict interpretations, one needs to really see, the court really needs to see whether the law provides for this condition or not. So law does not anywhere provide for a condition where a prosecution needs to be initiated only after assessments. So they can now run simultaneously in absence of any provision being there in the law. So this is again, we need to take care of both the proceedings naturally. There is assessment proceeding where your fact finding will happen, and then of course we can use those fact finding orders later in our pending prosecution proceedings. So that law is coming out of this case called Bhupen Champaklal Dalal. It's a 2001 Supreme Court case where the court said that when both the proceedings can run together, uh, the balance of convenience needs to be seen where if there is a finding which is favorable in the assessment order, till the time the assessment order is passed, the courts, the ACMM can really wait and give benefit of those findings to the assessee. So courts have taken such views as well. And practically also when our penalty proceedings are pending, usually your ACMMs grant you adjournments till the time the penalty are decided, because penalty proceedings have a very large bearing on your prosecutions in general. So all depends on the fact finding, of course. In these proceedings, the real facts are found, the consequences, and the rationale why a default happened, though they are found, and then of course ACMMs do refer to those facts to give their order later on. So in a case, we had one penalty before the CIT, and before we had one penalty, the officer had already initiated prosecution proceedings before the ACMM. So when we mentioned the ACMM that we have a CIT order, department again mentioned that okay, we have filed an appeal in the ITAT. Now court said that okay, we are adjourning the matter till the time ITAT decides your appeals. So as in when the ITAT gave us a favorable order, we went ahead and filed a discharge application. Of course, it's still pending because things work very slowly in Indian courts. We all know that. But again, there's a ray of hope, the relief available for us. Now, even after that, till now, the department has not appealed in this High Court, but they will definitely appeal. But one saving grace comes is that only after IT80, because IT80 is the last fact-finding authority in the income tax structure, after the last fact-finding authority, only substantial questions of law will be taken up in the High Court and in the Supreme Court. So when there is no substantial question of law and it's just a factual question, the High Courts usually dismiss cases only on the first hearing itself. So again, once there is a favorable IT80 order, there are high chances that the ACMMs usually will discharge or will quash the cases. So these are the remedies we're talking about. So now when a notice comes and when the proceeding happens, there are a lot of remedies we can look at. First remedy is, of course, filing our replies. And when the complaint is filed after that, 482 quashing petitions are a quick remedy which is available, which are available. Of course, they are a gamble, big gamble, because usually court does not want to go into the facts and the fact finding work when the trial is already pending before the officers, the ACMMs. So when 482 is filed, of course, we present a ground that, okay, person was not involved in the affairs or person was not even a director at that time. Usually quashing may happen at that time. Now, after that, when there is a penalty order, of course, like I had mentioned in my article, and a favorable penalty order is there in a assessee's favor, there the quashing will happen automatically. Because Supreme Court has settled this law in KC Builders versus Commissioner of Income Tax, where wherever there is a penalty order and penalty is decided in favor of the assessee, then there is a automatic quashing of the complaint. So now, why do they really do that? They really do that is because when the court determines any penalty order and grants it in favor of an assessee, they really look at the facts and the situations. So when factually a penalty is deleted, when a situation is appreciated in penalties itself, and the penalty orders are quashed, then prosecution should also be quashed, because penalty is, of course, a norm on a practice, but prosecution is an exception. So when penalty itself is quashed and the factual situation is present in place, then there is no way prosecution should also sustain. So after this, when we have a successful penalty order, we can always file for a 482. If 482 is disallowed, we can always file a discharge application before the trial courts, the ACMM. Now, another point which comes is that what needs to be done when you receive a notice, or when notice is not following the PNG, principles of natural justice, what I just mentioned before the session started. The writ petition is always the quickest remedy again, which can be filed before the courts. So once these remedies are taken, every remedy shall be selected on the basis of a case. What are the facts? How much are we really liable for any offense? And if we know that liability is much higher, then there is a chance of compounding as well, which can be filed before the officers. So when a case goes to trial, even there we can file a compounding before the concerned adjudicating officers in the income tax department. So compounding, of course, is not a matter of right. It's upon the department to allow the compounding on payment of certain fee and certain demand, whatever they tell you, they prescribe you. So these are the remedies what can be taken up at the time when a notice comes or a prosecution is even launched. So now I would be very happy to take up the questions if anyone has got questions here.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an articulate and insightful explanation. I'm sure it was a great learning experience for all of the participants over here. There are a few questions that I would like to ask you pertaining to this article. And I also, in the meanwhile, I also request all the participants to kindly post their questions in the chat box if they haven't already posted. So, coming to the first question, sir, what, in your view, was the probable reason attributable to the sudden rise of cases post demonetization? Was it the assessees or the government who was at fault?
So the reason are attributable to both government and SSCs. We know what happened during demonetization in 2016. So there was a press release in 2018, January or February it had come, So in the press release, the government in a very boastful manner said that the department has a high priority of prosecuting cases where there is an evasion of black money happening. So when demonetization happened, department went on to investigate and find those cases where there was an evasion of taxes, where there was a black money angle involved. Hence, there was a very sharp rise. So department had an SOP, internal SOP, which of course not a knowledge which I can confirm, but can it is confirmed only through third-party sources. That department had got an SOP to investigate cases and then prosecute cases. So then prosecution was something which was always a remedy they had taken. Now, there were a lot of offenses they found after demonetization happened. First was, of course, attempt to evade taxes. Second was black money. Third was non-depositing TDS. Fourth was non-filing of returns. So they took all those offenses and they started issuing notices left, right, and center to everyone. Hence, there was a sharp rise in prosecution numbers. Department very happily uh, said that there was a 184% increase in the number of cases post demonetization. Of course, a lot of them, 80 to 85% of those cases never saw light of the day, and only limited of them resulted into prosecutions later on. I think some 48 people were convicted after in 2017-18 after complaints were filed. So this all is attributable to one fact that there were a lot of financial irregularities which happened at the time of demonetization by assessees itself. So everyone knows Jandan mein people deposited money. They had a stack of cash which came out during demonetization. So department of course investigated everything, issued notices on that account. But after the 2019 circular came, the prosecution numbers started dropping down. They started dropping down even after the 2017-18 financial year itself, because that wrath of demonetization somehow got subsided after FY 18-19. So, of course, demonetization and black money had a big role to play, and the internal SOPs had a big role to play, of course. Back in those days, Arun Jaitley was the finance minister, and being the agendas what the government had promised that they will curb the black money, they will take the black money out. So those agendas were clearly followed while these prosecution notices were issued. I hope I answered the question fairly.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for getting so deep into it and explaining it to us. Um, the second question is, could you please provide a few illustrations of instances where a person could be held liable for the offense, even though they are not the assessee?
So one classic example is lawyers like us, CAs, tax consultants, we can get prosecuted. So there's a section where false returns or false accounts are filed. In those cases, CAs, lawyers, or tax consultants can be prosecuted for the offenses. Now, a lot of times, of course, as I mentioned, companies can't be prosecuted. The prosecution largely happens on the officers. So, say for example, there was an accounts manager. He was the in charge of filing the returns. That accounts manager will get a notice. There is a director. He'll get a notice. So there are a lot of examples everywhere where people other than the assessee are getting notice of a prosecution. Of course, we are also at a target. So our defenses needs to be chosen very carefully when such notices come.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure this has brought a little bit more clarity on this, and I'm sure a lot of us are going to be more careful here
Yeah.
on. And moving on to the third question, uh, do you think the rationale of Supreme Court in the case of Sasi Enterprises versus ACIT is a good precedent as initiating prosecution proceedings simultaneously during the pendency of the appellate proceedings may lead to ignorance of certain important facts involved in the case?
So, of course, going by the strict interpretation of law, as I mentioned earlier in the session, so law of taxation does not contain any provision where there is a bar because of assessment proceedings. So when the law is not present in the moment, and when I or any judge even has to read the law in a very strict manner, then in that case, to my mind, Sasi Enterprises is a good law, because this law is not a law settled by Sasi. This law is coming straight from 1984, from the case of SK Perumal, what I had mentioned earlier. So the rationale behind that is, of course, when investigation happens and when a prosecution remedy needs to be taken care of, then there is an urgency always to lodge those prosecutions. So we can't wait for assessments. Assessments may take their own sweet time. Sometimes assessment happens in 1 year, they happen in 2 years, then there'll be an appeal, then there'll be another appeal, so on and so forth. So investigation authorities can't wait till that long. So they really need to proceed as quickly and as urgently to file those prosecution cases, to come and to take cases to the criminal side of the law. Now, again, another rationale to that is, and it's a very well valid reason, that law is not available, which is even discussed in Sasi. So even in Sasi, court noted clearly, Justice Radhakrishnan noted that if the law had an intention to provide for this condition where assessment will bar the prosecutions, then it would have been clearly given after those sections or in the law itself. So when there is law is not clear, the law does not contain such provisions, then going by strict interpretation, one needs to run both the proceedings separately. And lot comes to the nature of the proceedings, of course. So assessment is, of course, more towards the civil side of things, if I need to compare in a layman way. And prosecution is a criminal side. So both remedies, both things can work hand in hand together. Of course, facts of one side will have definitely have bearing on another, and that's why Supreme Court in Bhupen Champaklal Dalal's case clearly said that the courts really need to take care of any positive factor in coming in assessment orders or any appellate orders. I hope this also answers the question.
Yes, sir. Correct. Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Moving on to the fourth question. What would be the course of action for the Revenue Department to prosecute those SSCs where the default amount is less than the threshold limit of 25 lakhs, but the SSC is a habitual offender?
So this circular is, of course, a beneficial circular that which applies only in genuine cases. So can I share my screen once, if that's possible? 1 second.
Yes, sir.
I think I need to grant permissions. Okay, so without sharing the screen only, I'll explain. So I think without sharing the screen only, I'll continue because there are some technical glitches from my side only. So coming to the fact that habitual offenders are really barred from claiming the benefit of the circular. The circular itself mentions there is point 2.1, clause 2.1 in the circular, which says that only the genuine cases will be getting the benefit of this 25 lakhs limit. Cases like habitual offenders will always be barred from this scenario. And of course, lot depends on the commissioners and the officers who are granting the consent under the circular as well. So while granting the consent, they will of course take care of the factual scenarios, whether a person is a habitual offender or not. So looking at that, of course, they can't blame, they can't get the benefit of this beneficial 25 lakh limit. So I think habitual offenders will fairly be covered in the prosecution cases, and they can be taken care and they'll be prosecuted, of course, as per whatever the law is.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure this has brought more clarity on this topic. Moving on to the next question. One of the strategies mentioned by you, which may be adopted by the SECs for filing a defense to the prosecution notices in the defense of a reasonable cause of default, what all can be brought within the ambit of a reasonable cause? Could you provide a hypothetical example for the same?
So the income tax law does not define the term reasonable cause anywhere. If you read the law, section 2 or any other section where definitions are given, there is no place where reasonable cause is defined. However, reasonable cause is a big remedy which is available for both penalty proceedings and for the prosecution proceedings also. So penalty, of course, won't be available after 2017 because the section is now omitted, which was giving you the benefit. Now, reasonable cause can only work for one set of case, which is the TDS default and a default by liquidator. So only in those cases this reasonable cause is available. So now reasonable cause, as per what is decided by the case laws given by Supreme Court over the times, reasonable cause should not be an absurd cause. So there are four elements a reasonable cause needs to fulfill. It should be not ridiculous. It should be a fair cause. It should be not absurd. It should not be irrational. So when I say these four conditions, so whenever there's a factual cause for a default, that cause needs to be looked at with a very detailed view. For example, now giving illustrations. So financial difficulty is one of the most chosen defense for reasonable cause by companies who are defaulting. So when companies usually say that, okay, we don't have the cash, we didn't have the outflow, we were facing losses, market conditions were bad. A lot of times invoices are booked by companies in their accounts, but TDS is not deducted and they don't even pay the parties. In that case, there's a reasonable cause. Of course, there's a financial loss. Because of that, I can't even pay the party. So even though when invoices are booked, TDS and money is not being paid out. Now that can be a reasonable cause which can be accepted by the courts and which has been accepted in past by Patna High Court in a case. Now there's another chance where assessee may claim that, okay, I have a reasonable cause of financial difficulty, but they have nothing to corroborate that. Of course, the books of accounts says otherwise, or the conduct of company says otherwise. For example, I'm merging with a company, I'm shelling out X number of dollars or rupees while the merger is happening. But when it comes to tax obligation, I'm claiming a loss or I'm claiming financial difficulty. That will not be reasonable cause. Another reasonable cause usually becomes age of an assessee. So there is a board instruction, very old board instruction, I think 90s or 80s, where the CBDT said that where an assessee is over 70 years of age, that assessee cannot be prosecuted. For example, there is illness. So now the compliances have not happened because of, say, COVID. The entire office contacted COVID. It became a hotspot. Person who was handling financials died, and person who was handling return filing, he also died. He was sick. Those cases can be of reasonable cause. But again, over there, one really needs to see the uh, limitations which were being extended by time by the CBDT. So everything needs to be read together. Now, another reasonable cause can be that which we have also used in one of the cases is, so old directors had run away with the documents, so there was no way financials could have been prepared. So that's a genuine cause. Whenever there is some mismanagement done by your chartered accountant or by your officer, that also can be a reasonable cause. Everything needs to be corroborated. That needs to be seen factually before taking the defense.
Thank you, sir, for
Thanks.
explaining it so precisely and for the examples as well. Moving on to my next question, don't you think that the tax prosecution mechanism is being misused by the revenue department? As in many cases where the tribunal rules in favor of the assessee, a subsequent appeal is immediately filed before the appropriate forum by the revenue, thus leading to more pendency of cases and making the process less convenient and reliable for the assessee.
This, of course, goes back to a point I had raised earlier in the session. A lot of times, these appeals are filed on frivolous reasons, for frivolous reasons, of course. As I mentioned, ITAT is the last fact-finding authority. So once we have a favorable factual order, of course, facts can't be challenged before the High Court or the Supreme Court. It's only a substantial question of law. So as long as we have a favorable order from the last fact-finding authority, we can always go and claim a benefit of that before the magistrate while our prosecution is going on. Of course, tax proceedings will culminate only when Supreme Court gives a favorable order or department comes to term with ITAT order or the High Court order or whatever the order is being passed. So this, of course, is a tool where appeals are always filed in bulk right after a favorable order comes from ITAT. But that will not bar you from raising your defenses before the ACMM, because now from the final fact finding authority, you have your favorable orders available with you. And till the time those orders are not stayed by the High Court or the Supreme Court because of a very genuine reason, till that time you can always go and file your discharge applications. Till that time you can always claim a benefit of those orders before the ACMM. So
Right,
things
sir.
will happen,
Definitely.
it will keep moving. But again, we also need to keep building our defenses on the basis of the favorable orders we're getting from time to time.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Thank you, sir. Um, so moving on to my last question. The faceless assessment scheme was brought in 2020 by the government to reduce the pendency of taxation cases and promote transparency.
Yeah.
Accordingly, do you feel it has been able to achieve its objective?
So there is no
What
transparency
the,
first. We
mm,
discussed this. There is no transparency first because faceless assessment violates the first basic principle, which is natural justice. Because firstly, there needs to be a face-to-face hearing. Other party needs to be heard properly. Facts needs to be determined properly. All that is not happening. This has only increased the pendency of cases. There is every week or every month, there is a High Court order on a writ petition coming out, quashing the assessment proceedings because assessment proceedings were against the procedure laid down or they were not following the principles of natural justice. One common mistake which all the assessing officers in the National Faceless Assessments Committee are doing is not giving a draft assessment order or not giving a show cause notice. Because as per procedure, if you give a draft order or a show cause notice, assessee gets a chance to file their objections to the order which is being passed. Even before it attains finality. And they get a chance to get a hearing before the concerned authorities for that purpose. So when you don't issue those notices, which is happening a lot because these orders are now passed in haste, then you clearly violate the principles of natural justice. So courts from time and again, they are upholding the principles of natural justice in taxation system. Even when an order is not detailed, which is also another problem with faceless assessments. They're not looking at the facts, they're not looking at the law, order are absurd, they just rubber stamp orders. Even in that cases, when order is a non-speaking one, when I say a speaking order gives facts, gives the law, gives the rationale, and gives the judgment. So there are 4 or 5 criterias a speaking order follows. When the order is a non-speaking one, it is directly in violation of the basic principles of law. So this is happening on a regular basis in the current scenario, which is uh, followed by the assessing officers. So yeah, faceless is not helping, but it's rather creating more problems to my mind. But
Right.
there is a long way. It will get better with time. That's how income tax works. Even when Vishwas scheme came back in January, February 2020, they had a lot of glitches which were clarified time after time. Even till December last year, there were FAQs coming out. There were a lot of lit petitions which were filed by the assessees everywhere because the authorities were not following the due process of law given the circulars, given the schemes. So I think it will get better. It will get settled more in the coming years, and one should be always hopeful.
yeah, that's true. So maybe just teething
Yes,
issues
sir.
right
Indeed.
now. Maybe you'll get, we are hopeful that it will get, better as we go on.
Yeah, and there are faceless ITAT also, which has now come up after this budget announcement in February this year. So even faceless assessments will also set a tone for faceless tribunal hearings. There is, I think, a good 60-page docket ICI has issued last month on faceless ITAT hearings. So there's a long road. Our officers need to adapt to the procedures and to the system of digital assessments. So there's time, and we are hopeful it will get better.
Totally. Yes.
Because if you understand the officer's psyche, an officer will always work under the instructions or the office memorandums or the SOPs given to him by the Board of Direct Taxes. He will not use his own wisdom while assessing a case. He needs to strictly abide by the SOPs. So when these writ petitions happen, when these cases happens, when the glitches are found out, SOPs are also issued, instructions are also issued to these officers, and of course, they make the way better and more clearer for future.
Yes, right, sir. And like you rightly said, we should always be hopeful
True.
towards it. Um, yes. So at this point of time, I would like to take the opportunity to thank Yojit Parikh sir and express my kind gratitude for on behalf of the Center for Comparative and International Taxation for accepting our invitation to address this session. We strongly look forward to having you again with us on a maybe on a different topic as well. So thank you very much, sir.
We
And
really have,
without failing to mention,
yeah.
yes, sir, definitely. Without failing to mention, I would also like to thank all the participants who had joined this session, without whom this webinar would not have been successful. And on behalf of the Center for Comparative and International Taxation, I assure that we will continue to strive towards knowledge, and in furtherance of the same, we will continue to bring up such sessions for everyone's taxation knowledge and understanding. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, Kriti ma'am, and thank you so much, Sana, for joining us.
Thank you, Samir. Thank you for
Thank you.
for conducting such a nice webinar. Yojit, I want to thank you personally. Thank you so much. It was a very interesting webinar, and the article was also very interesting. Thank you so much for taking out time for the webinar. And we look forward to more such interesting articles and more webinars like this.
Thank you so much, everyone. And of course, whenever the time comes, I will, of course, give you more interesting reads. And of course, endeavor is writing, understanding more, developing our own knowledge, and sharing the knowledge. So I will look for more future collaborations in future, in coming times. Thank you,
Thank
Sana,
you so much.
and thank you, everyone, for joining.